December 15th, 1982. The bottom line, Greenwich Village. Madonna pressed her back against the narrow hallway wall as two men in expensive suits walked past, their voices carrying the casual cruelty of industry veterans discussing disposable talent. After Jonathan wraps his set, we'll have that club girl close out the night. Which one? Madonna something, the one with the demo tape that's been making rounds. Robert thought we should give her a slot. A pause, ice clinking in glasses. The sound of men who controlled careers deciding fates over cocktails. Is she any good? Does it matter? She's performing for exposure. Costs us nothing. Fills the last slot before we wrap. Most of the real decision makers will be gone by then anyway. How long should I introduce her? Keep it brief. Just say the name. This crowd came to see serious artists, not dance floor music. Light laughter. The sound of doors closing on dreams. Madonna's fingers tightened around the cassette tape in her hand, the demo that had taken her 6 months and every dollar she had to record. 3 songs that represented everything she believed about music, about herself, about the future she was going to create. She had been 24 years old for 3 weeks, old enough to understand that moments like this could define everything, young enough to believe she could control the outcome through sheer force of will. The bottom line wasn't Madison Square Garden. It was a club that held maybe 200 people on a good night. But tonight, those 200 people included A&R executives from every major label, music journalists from Rolling Stone and Village Voice, radio programmers who could make or break a career with a single playlist decision. This was her shot, the one she had been fighting for since she left Michigan with $35 and a burning certainty that she was meant for something bigger than Bay City could contain. The showcase had started 3 hours earlier with acts that already had record deals, management companies, and the kind of industry support Madonna could only dream about. Singer-songwriters with acoustic guitars and stories about their upcoming albums. New wave bands with synthesizers and connections to important producers. She had watched from the cramped backstage area, studying how each act handled the crowd, noting which songs got the strongest response, analyzing the subtle dynamics between performers and industry audience. This wasn't just entertainment, it was business. And Madonna had learned to approach every business interaction like a chess match. The preparation for this night had consumed her life for 2 months. When Robert Sterling from Sire Records had called to offer her the slot, she had said yes before he finished explaining the terms. No payment, no guaranteed recording time. Just 8 minutes on stage in front of people who could change her life. 8 minutes to prove that a girl from Michigan who worked coat check at Danceteria to pay rent could stand next to established artists and belong there. She had rehearsed until her voice was raw, until her backing musicians could play the songs blindfolded, until every movement felt natural but calculated. Steve Bray had pushed her to be more conservative, to choose safer songs that wouldn't challenge an industry audience expecting familiar structures. But Madonna had learned something about herself during those long nights of preparation. She didn't want to fit in. She wanted to be undeniable. The sound check that afternoon had been rushed, dismissive. The sound engineer had treated her like an inconvenience, barely adjusting levels, clearly eager to finish his workday. The venue manager had shown her to what could generously be called a dressing room, actually a storage closet with a mirror propped against boxes of liquor. She had hung her outfit on a pipe running along the ceiling and tried not to think about how different this was from her fantasies of making it in the music business. In her imagination, breakthrough moments happened in perfect spaces with attentive crews and respectful treatment. Reality was fluorescent lights that made her skin look pale, the smell of stale beer seeping through thin walls, and conversations in hallways about whether she was worth the few minutes she had been allocated. The headlining acts had proper dressing rooms, catered food, personal assistants checking on their needs. Madonna had a warm Coke she had bought from a vending machine, and the certainty that nobody in the building expected anything significant from her performance. But expectation was something Madonna had learned to weaponize. When people expected nothing, they were unprepared for everything. The first act had been a solo artist with a major label deal, clean production values, and songs that sounded like everything else on radio. The applause had been polite but forgettable. The second act brought more energy, but still fit comfortably within established categories. With each performance, Madonna felt the bar rising and falling simultaneously. Rising because the crowd was warmed up, engaged, ready to be impressed. Falling because they were also becoming comfortable with familiar sounds, less likely to embrace something genuinely different. She had positioned herself where she could watch the industry section, front tables where executives sat with notepads, occasionally leaning over to whisper comments to colleagues. She studied their body language, noting when they seemed engaged versus when they were simply being professionally polite. Most of them were men in their 30s and 40s who had built careers by recognizing patterns, by understanding what worked and what didn't. Madonna represented everything that shouldn't work, a female artist who wrote her own songs, controlled her own image, and refused to be categorized as either innocent or overtly sexual. She was both and neither, which made her impossible to market according to conventional wisdom. The conversation she had overheard wasn't unusual. It was simply the first time she had heard it spoken so directly. She was the throwaway act, the time filler, the artist who would perform after the important people had already made their real decisions for the evening. But Madonna had learned something about being underestimated. It created opportunities that confidence couldn't provide. At 11:30, a production assistant knocked on her storage closet door. "You're up in 10 minutes." Madonna looked at herself in the mirror one final time. Not the frightened girl from Michigan, not the coat check worker from Dansteria. The woman who was about to walk onto that stage and change the trajectory of her entire life. She had chosen her outfit with military precision. Black leather jacket over a lace top that revealed just enough to be intriguing without being distracting. Jewelry that caught stage lights but didn't overpower her face. Makeup that enhanced her features without creating a costume. She looked like herself but elevated, accessible but untouchable, familiar enough to be appealing, strange enough to be memorable. The hallway leading to the stage felt longer than it actually was. She could hear the current act finishing their set, the applause that followed, the host making small talk with the crowd while equipment was changed. As she waited in the wings, Madonna could see the audience. 200 faces, most of them tired from a long evening of music. Some were gathering coats, checking watches, clearly ready to leave. Industry executives were having quiet conversations about other topics entirely. This was her audience, distracted, exhausted, already mentally moving on to after-parties and hotel bars where the real business would be conducted. The host walked to the microphone with the enthusiasm of someone fulfilling a contractual obligation. His introduction was exactly what she had been promised. Brief, professional, forgettable. Closing out tonight's showcase, we have Madonna. That was it. No context, no build-up, no reason for anyone to pay attention. Just a name followed by polite applause from people who were already thinking about their exits. Madonna walked onto the stage. The lights hit her face, and for a moment she was blinded, but her feet knew where to go. She had visualized this moment hundreds of times. The walk to center stage, the adjustment of the microphone, the first look at the crowd. When her eyes adjusted, she saw exactly what she had expected. A room full of people who had no idea what was about to happen to them. She didn't speak immediately. Instead, she let the silence build, let the casual conversations die out, let the focus gradually shift to the figure standing alone under the lights. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a certainty that seemed impossible given the circumstances. "I'm Madonna, and I'm going to sing you something you haven't heard before." The statement was simple, direct, and delivered with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was promising. Some people in the audience shifted in their seats, curious despite themselves. She turned to Steve Bray, gave him a barely perceptible nod, and they began. The first song started not with the gentle intro she had originally planned, but with a driving beat that demanded immediate attention. Steve's drum machine programming cut through the venue like a blade, precise and insistent. The bass line that followed was nothing like the singer-songwriter acoustic arrangements the crowd had been hearing all evening. This was dance music, club music, the sound of underground New York filtered through Madonna's understanding of what pop could become. And then she began to sing. Her voice was unlike anything that audience had heard that night. Not the folky vulnerability of the earlier acts, not the aggressive posturing of the rock performers. This was something new, powerful but controlled, emotional but calculating, intimate but designed to fill every corner of the room. She sang about ambition without apology, about wanting success with an honesty that made some people uncomfortable. The lyrics were personal but universal, specific to her experience, but broad enough for anyone who had ever felt dismissed to recognize themselves. But it wasn't just the song, it was Madonna herself. She moved like someone who had studied every great performer and distilled their techniques into something uniquely her own. Not copying anyone, but building on everything she had absorbed from years of watching, learning, preparing for this moment. Every gesture was deliberate. Every glance at the audience was strategic. She wasn't just performing a song, she was conducting a masterclass in how to command attention without begging for it. The industry tables had gone quiet. Executives who had been multitasking were now focused entirely on the stage. The A&R representative who had dismissed her as that club girl was leaning forward, his notepad forgotten. The first song ended to silence that lasted exactly long enough to make everyone uncomfortable. Then the applause began, tentative at first, then building as people realized they had just witnessed something significant. Madonna didn't acknowledge the response. Instead, she moved immediately into her second song, a ballad that showcased a completely different side of her voice. Where the first song had been about power, this one revealed vulnerability without weakness, emotion without manipulation. The room was completely still. Conversations at the bar had stopped. The venue staff had gathered to watch. Even the industry veterans who prided themselves on maintaining professional detachment were caught in the spell of a performance that redefined what they thought they knew about female pop artists. When the second song ended, the silence lasted longer. Not the awkward quiet of audiences deciding how to respond, but the profound hush that follows genuine artistry. Then someone began to clap. Not the polite applause that had followed every other act, but real enthusiasm. Others joined, and within seconds the entire room was on its feet. Madonna stood center stage, acknowledging the response with a slight nod that managed to be both gracious and knowing. She had delivered exactly what she had promised, something they hadn't heard before. As she left the stage, she could see the industry section buzzing with conversation. Phones were being pulled out. In 1982, this meant people were making notes about who to call tomorrow morning. Business cards were being exchanged with urgency that hadn't existed all evening. Back in her storage closet dressing room, Madonna sat quietly for a moment, not celebrating, not analyzing, just allowing herself to feel the weight of what had just happened. Within minutes, there was a knock on her door. Robert Sterling from Sire Records, the executive who had originally booked her as a time filler, stood in the doorway with an expression that combined surprise and calculation. "We need to talk," he said. Before she could respond, someone else appeared behind him. A journalist from Village Voice who had ignored every other act suddenly wanted to know everything about Madonna's background, influences, future plans. Then a radio programmer from WLIR, the Long Island station that could break new artists in the New York market. Could he get a copy of her demo for possible airplay? The hallway outside her door became crowded with people who hadn't known her name an hour earlier, but now saw her as the solution to problems they hadn't realized they had. Madonna answered their questions with the same controlled confidence she had shown on stage. Professional but not eager, interested but not desperate. She had learned that the first rule of negotiation was never to reveal how much you needed what they were offering. By 1 a.m., she had 3 separate meetings scheduled for the following week. By January, she would have a record deal that gave her more creative control than most new artists ever received. By December 1983, Holiday would be climbing the charts, and Madonna would be well on her way to becoming exactly what she had always known she could be. But all of that success traced back to 8 minutes on a stage in Greenwich Village, to a performance that nobody expected and nobody forgot, to the night Madonna stopped being the club girl with the demo tape and became the artist who changed everything. The Bottom Line continued hosting industry showcases for years afterward. Occasionally, when introducing new acts, someone would reference the night Madonna performed there. "This is the venue," they would say, "where nobodies become legends." Because that's what happened. An artist who had been dismissed, relegated to the end of the evening, and talked about like she was doing them a favor, took 8 minutes and transformed them into inevitability. She proved that talent combined with preparation and absolute self-belief couldn't be ignored. no matter how much industry gatekeepers wanted to maintain their comfortable categories. The next time you feel dismissed or underestimated, remember this story. Remember Madonna standing in that hallway, hearing executives laugh about her being just a time filler, and choosing to channel that dismissal into power. Remember that sometimes the greatest revenge against doubt isn't anger, but excellence. Some voices are too powerful to ignore. Some talents are too brilliant to dismiss. Some dreams are too strong to defeat. Madonna knew this in her bones. And on that December night in 1982, she made the industry know it too. The performance lasted 8 minutes. The impact lasted forever.